Thanks, everybody. My name is Rob Pierikowski. I'm the Assistant Director of Online Teaching for SUNY Online, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Daniel Stanford. Daniel is an instructional technology consultant, as well as a lecturer at DePaul University in Chicago, where he was an instructional designer for 15 years. He's got quite a bit of experience behind him. He was born in New Jersey, then moved to Pennsylvania. I have to get this right. And then went to college in Alabama, and then worked at DePaul University in Chicago for many years, and now teaches from the sunny shores of Atlanta, Georgia, something like that, right? But it all began in 1999. When Daniel was a student at the University of Alabama, and he was a production assistant for a public television station, for the Center for Public Television, I assume, at the University of Alabama. And he just happened to mention that he knew a little bit about working with HTML. Did I shut this off?
I'm just going to stop sharing.
And so quite serendipitously, he sort of fell into this educational technology space that we all find ourselves in. And then went on to basically spend most of his career helping faculty and everyone understand the intersection between technology and teaching. He also helped create the first virtual 360 tour for the Birmingham Museum of Art. And in his own words, he has a passion for great design and great teaching. So without further ado, I introduce Daniel Stanford.
Hey, everyone. Am I coming through okay? Does this sound loud enough? I'm a little tall. I mean, I don't know, relatively tall. Hi, so it's great to be here today. And thanks so much, Alex, for inviting me. Full disclosure, I'm kind of here mostly because I created a Google group and a bunch of people joined. I thought maybe 10 of my colleagues in instructional design, instructional tech would want to talk about AI back in December. And then 160 people showed up to an informal Zoom meeting that I created. So I got the sense that there was something there, and people keep asking me to talk about it as though I'm some sort of expert. So I'm going to do my best today to fake it until I make it. I have a few tips and things that I've learned observing what's going on in these different groups. Also, by the way, Rob made up my bio just from looking at stuff online. Like, that wasn't the bio I wrote. And it was one of the best made up in a couple hours bios ever. And Rob said earlier when we were talking that I look too young to have been doing this stuff since the late 90s. And so Rob is my official new confidence building, my agent and handler. All speaking gigs can go through Rob now. So thank you for the introduction. No, it was through human connection, through real, we sat at a table, we talked, there was eye contact. It was all the pre-COVID things we loved. It was beautiful. It was a love story. Okay, so I got to get some of this stuff out of the way. Let's just minimize this for now and share my screen. All right, so far so good. All right, so yeah, suggestions. I'm taking all your tips.
Oh, wait, how do you get this into display mode?
Oh, I can get into slideshow mode. I'm
Okay,
good.
okay.
Yep, I got this. Okay, so slides can be found here. There's going to be several links as we go along. I tried to make this as interactive as possible. So hopefully it's not just me talking at you. And also for the folks in the remote session, I gave a heads up to the virtual moderator with some of these links. So hopefully those links will go into the chat, and I'll pause periodically if the folks joining us remotely have questions. General agenda for my session today. First, I'm going to quiz you to see if anyone in here is a real artist, or if any of you deserve an honorary MFA. We'll see if you know anything about creativity and what it really means, or if you're just faking it like I am sometimes. We'll talk about ChatGPT, go through a few examples, and then I sort of rearranged stuff at the last minute and put some of the boring stuff at the end. I'm guessing that at this point, most of you have tried ChatGPT or seen examples of it. So can you just raise your hand if you've actually created an account and used it, like typed anything in a box? Okay. And then to my virtual moderator, can you tell me, since I'm in slide sharing mode right now, can we get like a reaction from the Zoom family? And can the virtual moderator kind of summarize if most of the folks have tried it out?
Seeing a lot of yes.
Okay. I had a feeling. So I don't want to belabor the basics too much. I think some of you have already probably heard of some of the pros and cons, but I have a slide on that in the slide deck. To start us off though, I want to make all of you do a little something interactive, but anonymous. Okay, so no pressure if you mess it up. So you can take a quiz at pollev.com/Daniel2. And I'm going to check on my phone just to make sure it's still active and working correctly. That's pollev.com/Daniel2. You can go there on your mobile device or in a new browser window, and you'll see a question. All right, so if I set this up correctly, when you go to that URL again is pollev.com/Daniel2, should see 4 example paintings. I want you to tell me which one of these you think is worth somewhere in the ballpark of $5 million or more. So which one is the expensive one? All right, interesting. So far, we've got a lot of votes for D. Does anybody have a guess who might have created that? Okay, interesting. What about A? Anybody vote for A? Okay, and why? Okay. So our what's your name? Stuart said, I know nothing about art, so I chose the one that looked like the opposite of a $5 million painting, right? So a contrarian investment strategy. I like that. Okay. Anybody else want to make your case for one of the other options? Come on, somebody who voted for B or C, or an online participant if in the chat or okay. And so our audience member said I voted for B because it looks like red blood cells. And what's your discipline? Clinical answer was clinical laboratory sciences. Okay. That's a great rationale. So it resonated with you. It spoke to you. Art's supposed to do that. Anybody, how about somebody online? Do we have anybody online who wants to say why they think C might or might not be a home run? And then is it Chrissy? Am I saying that?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to weigh in?
So I'm not seeing anyone who said C, but a lot of people said that they chose D because it looked like a Jackson Pollock.
Okay. Interesting. By the
And
way,
somebody said C because you just never know with art. Ken English said that.
good. I feel really smart right now because the one that got the least number of votes is the correct answer. So now the real question is, does anyone who voted for C, maybe one of our home viewers, know who the artist is? Oh, did somebody guess? Nope. So oh wait, sorry, did I say C or B? Oh, no, sorry, I meant to do that to you. It's B. It's the one with the least votes, the red blood cells. But does anybody know who made it? It is a Japanese artist. Somebody said, I think one of the remote participants, maybe somebody said Warhol, which is a good guess because the artist is actually named Yayoi Kusama. She's a Japanese artist, and she is kind of well known if you like pop art because she has repeatedly accused Warhol of ripping off her stuff. She actually exhibited a lot in New York when she first came to the US in, I think, around the 60s, and would repeatedly show stuff that was pretty new and innovative. And then it would pop up in her white male contemporaries' work, just sometimes within months. Their exhibitions would get much better press at bigger galleries. So anyway, Kusama's work is really interesting to me. I found it when I was in graduate school, and I always loved pop art, and I kept digging and finding these folks to write papers about who were sort of unsung heroes, right? And Kusama is obsessed with polka dots. And if you've seen any of her work, you might know she does these mirrored rooms where things project onto infinity. So you can stand or look into the mirrored rooms, and there's sometimes lights or dots everywhere, or these pumpkins that are covered in polka dots. She actually lives in a psychiatric hospital that she submitted herself or checked herself into voluntarily in the 70s and just kind of never moved out. So really fun story. She's still alive in her 90s, and her stuff's worth a lot of money now. All right. Next question. So you can continue to answer. Let me just activate the next one. Which of these three pieces, again, you're at pollev.com/Daniel2, and you should see 3 images. Which of these was created by a real person? Oh, and by the way, those other 3 paintings are all available on Etsy for a price that if you'd like to find them, you can send them to me. I am now their agent, and I'm happy to connect you for a very reasonable finder's fee. All right, so the question for this one, for the new quiz, is which of these was created by a real person, not by AI? Normally, I don't like to show the results as they're coming in because, as you know, I'm sure some of you expert researchers may realize that could impact the validity of our study. Okay, so we have a lot of votes for A. Does anybody want to guess why? Or if anybody says something in the chat to our virtual moderator, feel free to chime in. We have a volunteer in the audience.
On B and C, there's just something a little bit off with them. They look like they were taken from photos and, well, it would have been photoshopped, but photoshopped by a computer.
Okay. I'm sorry I can't show this larger and Poll Everywhere's interface on screen, but I'm assuming all of you have a bigger version that you should be able to see on the Poll Everywhere. You may have to lean over and look at your neighbor's screen if you can't see it. Okay. Any other guesses or comments?
We're saying over here that AI doesn't do hands and faces look a little bit weird. So that's why B and C are not being chosen.
Okay, great. So you're all wrong because all of these were created by AI. The first one, sorry, the first one was legit. There was a right answer to that one. So I get to do at least one. That's a trick question, right? The first one was created with a prompt somewhere along the lines of peanut butter and jelly Rubik's Cube, something like that. I just pulled these together. I saw a watercolor over the bed in my hotel room this morning, and I was like, I have to bring this in. But then I went down a whole rabbit hole, and then that watercolor didn't even make it into the final thing. So anyway, the second one was a prompt. So these were all created using DALL-E, which, in case you didn't know, is a mashup of DALL-E, as in Salvador Dali, and WALL-E, the robot from the Pixar movie. Yeah, it's so much. It sounds like fun to use it when it has such a sweet, inventive name that maybe a real person came up with, or did they? Okay, so then the second one was a prompt, something along the lines of Muppets Gate Crash Paris Fashion Week, and it created that image. And then the third one was Ronald McDonald guest stars in episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, parentheses 1987. So I found all these in an article, by the way. I'll add the article link. I didn't want to spoil the surprise, but I can add this to the slide deck at some point where the article was that I found this that had some of these highlights. People share all these things on Twitter, and you've probably seen some of these on your own, but I want to share a few that maybe hadn't popped up on your radar. Okay. Got 2 more of these to go. All right. In this case, for the one I just activated, I'd like to know what grade you would give this submission, assuming it was from a real student or a real person and they drew it, for a Drawing 101 course. Oh, sorry, did I activate it? No. Oh, I rolled over the button, but I did not activate. As a user interface designer, I have a lot of feedback on that, but I won't get into that right now. I'm just checking in with our virtual moderators. Everybody doing okay? Sorry, I can't see the chat at the moment.
We're doing great.
Okay, good. I thought this was a nice equity-minded activity because the folks at home can play along with the home version on a level playing field, just like everybody here in the room has to do. Okay, so we got lots of A's, a few B's. Somebody gave it an F. I'm kind of curious if that person would like to share. Oh, someone here in the room. What's your name? It's Anne. Anne's in big trouble, y'all.
No, it looks like someone took a photograph and put a filter on it.
Oh, okay. But
Oh, you
assuming,
need it for
okay,
the
so say
online,
that
okay.
again for us, Anne.
It looks like someone took a photograph and then put a filter on it. I've been playing with filters a lot for some things that I'm doing for a brochure that I'm working on. And that looks like a black and white filter,
Oh,
artist's view.
interesting. Okay, so you're dubious and skeptical. That's skepticism is healthy. Anyone at home, is there anything in the chat that popped up or somebody want to weigh in on justify their grade?
So Maureen Larson said she would give this an A, assuming this was drawn by a person and not AI.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to give you a twist on the question, and all of you should be able to change your answer. There should be like a little trash can icon or something next to the one you picked, and it'll let you unpick it and redo it. Okay. So now I want to tell you, what if you knew that the assignment included, how do I phrase this? Let's say that you found out, you're the instructor, and you found out that the way the student did this though was they took a photo, they made a grid on top of the photo, and then they expanded that grid onto a piece of paper and hand drew in each square of that grid. So maybe it was a student who struggled with how to do form and represent proportions properly. So they did what's called gridding sometimes in drawing assignments. They took a photo, put a grid over it to map it out in a series of squares, and then colored in the squares to represent values of dark and light rather than drawing it with no grid as a guide. Would that change anything about the grade you would give? So for the photo?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Say you were okay with them using a photo, but you now know that they used a grid as help. Yeah. Let's assume you didn't tell them whether or not they could or they couldn't. Sure. Does that change the grade for anyone? I'm just going to look at the bars for a second. Okay, so the bar shifted a little bit. Let's say that you explicitly told them they weren't supposed to put a grid on there. Okay, I want to see if we can get it to shift a little bit, but they did draw it by hand. Oh, we got a D. We got somebody voting suddenly for a D because they put the grid on there. All right. Anybody have a thought on why? Let's say it wasn't part of the assignment and they were supposed to draw it without a bunch of lines. Why does that change your mind? Yes. Oh, do you want the microphone?
So I'm not an art teacher, nor do I play one on TV.
That's okay.
But I feel like for me in this assignment, if I was the instructor, I'm looking for the student to express themselves and their creativity. And this sort of borders on plagiarism, and it's sort of taking somebody else's work and taking a shortcut to the assignment that's being submitted, and not so much that they're expressing themselves and allowing their work to come through.
Okay, because they put the grid on it? Let's assume the photo part was okay, though. that it's okay that they had a photo as inspiration. Is the grid the thing that shifted it for you a little bit?
Yes, because that creates a shortcut. That
Really?
isn't, yeah.
What makes it feel like a shortcut?
Because I feel like you're skipping the skill that would be what I'm hoping that they'd accomplish with the assignment.
And part of that is this activity of being able to draw something with your own two hands without the visual guide of dividing it up into a series of just little squares.
Right. Plus
Okay.
also what happened to me in grade 3.
Okay. We do, everybody, this is only an hour and a half session. I would love to turn this into a therapy session, but we have multiple other hands up in the room. We have time for maybe one more comment. Anne did wait. I'll let Anne weigh in again since you had skepticism in the beginning. Go ahead.
When you first said it, I changed it from F to A, but then you said you explicitly told the student not to use a grid. I dropped it to a D.
Okay, but why
because
D and
he
not
did
F?
because the student didn't follow the instructions of the assignment. I'm also not an art teacher, nor do I play one on TV, but just in terms of completing the assignment as assigned,
Mhm.
because you assign things a particular way to elicit a particular skill. And so if they disregard the instructions, then they did that
So why is it still a D for you and not an F?
because they did it.
Okay, that's fine. Interesting. All right, let's do one more, and then I will throw you a little insight. Okay, so if I activated correctly, I'm just double checking on my phone to see what you see. So the question here is, who or what do you think created this image? I promise we're going to practice with ChatGPT before I leave here today, but I thought this might wake you all up a little bit. Okay, so a bunch of votes for AI. Maybe I should have done this one first because now you're all just suspicious of everything I say or offer you. Okay, so does I'm trying to think. Okay, somebody said AI. Why? Let's take one from the virtual audience. Somebody who said AI. Do we have a comment in the chat about why?
Somebody said that Jen Nettleton said the forehead looks off, but Helena Hubie said that this is a famous image. So I don't know. And then it says it looks like the famous image, but it's in the style. That's what Michelle Hickson said.
All right, very interesting. So I'll cut to the chase with this one because we got to get to the ChatGPT stuff, which I don't really care about, honestly. There's just like this, I would much rather talk about this all day, but everybody seems excited about ChatGPT, so we'll do that. So this is a very famous image. It was originally photographed by Walker Evans. It was a Depression era project. Walker Evans was actually sent for this assignment to a farm in a very rural part of Alabama, not that far from where I went to college. And the woman's name in this photograph is Allie Mae Burroughs. Walker Evans is the original photographer, but this particular image and where I sourced it is a photograph by an artist named Sherry Levine. Sherry Levine took a picture of Walker Evans' picture, called it After Walker Evans, and put it in a frame in a gallery and did a whole exhibition and is now very well known as a feminist artist who takes pictures of guys' work, rephotographs it, puts it in a gallery with her name on it in this ultimate poke in the eye of postmodernist art saying, what is authorship, right? What is originality? And you not only can you can make a lot of money doing it. When I learned about this in graduate school, my head exploded. I was so angry and annoyed, and I hated conceptual art, right? Like I was that person who would go to the galleries and see like a light bulb on a string that was being blown around by a fan in the corner. And then there was an artist statement about existential capitalist something. And I was that person. I felt just like my dad. I was like, a kid could have painted this, right? Or anybody could have done this. And my art teachers would always say, but they didn't, right? Somebody put this here. And it brings up all these questions for us of what is originality? What is creativity, right? Is it your ability as a human being to have the idea to have a weird light bulb on a string, to have a pile of trash in the middle of the floor, and that the trash represents body? I mean, there's actually a pretty well-known work by an artist who, I think he had pieces of candy on a pile on the floor, but the pieces of candy represented the weight of his partner who died of HIV, and people were encouraged to take a piece of candy as they came to the exhibit. And so the exhibit changed over time, and the amount of candy that was left represented this like ephemeral, this loss, right? This slow progressive wasting away. So there's this really crazy, powerful artist statement, right? Something super personal, but to a lot of people, it's just like a pile of candy on the floor. So what I'd like to do, the reason why I want to start this whole presentation off is because I feel like all this talk of ChatGPT has really push to the side the much bigger conversation that I'm more excited to have, and that I'd like to have with my students, and I plan to talk to them about a lot in the spring when I teach my usual web design course, which is, what is authorship? What is stealing? What is laziness? Does laziness even exist? What is cheating? What is original? And what do you bring, right? What is your value today? How can I help you get a job tomorrow? And how are you going to help yourself get a job or a promotion 10 years from now? Because none of us know what the hell 10 years from now is going to look like, right? Okay. Oh, also, by the way, that last one, the sketch, the grid thing, that was a grad school project of mine. So to the person who thought that it looked like a filter applied, ouch. Okay, now. That was before filters. I did know Photoshop, but that was just me taking a terrible photograph of it in my house in a room with bad lighting. But I still have that project from school because I'm really bad at drawing. And I love that assignment because the grid for me was this incredible comfort, right? It was a form of scaffolding, a form of training wheels, because I really struggle with proportion. And every time I try to draw what I think a human face is supposed to look like, and all I have to stare at is a blank screen, it looks like something a child would draw. But when I did that grid exercise, which was a part of the assignment, in my defense, I was allowed to use the grid. It was required, actually. But it was amazing because I filled in all those things, and I didn't believe at first that it was going to look like anything, right? And then I stepped away from it, and little by little, it looked almost exactly like the photo. It was like a photorealistic drawing, and I really love it. But there are people who would say, right, that's not real art, or that's training wheels, or that's a 100 level project, right? So let's go back over here. So if you haven't already created an account for ChatGPT, this would be a great time to do that. You can do that at chat.openai.com. And then we're going to jump into a hands-on activity. And if we have time toward the end, I will circle back to some thought-provoking highlights and features and whatnot. And if you want to pair up with a neighbor or something, you don't have to do this all on your own. And it might be a little easier on a laptop if you have one. Hopefully everyone is able to get in. This for now, it's just the URL, but I'm going to jump over to the actual interface in just a second. Oh, really? Well, you might have to make a friend. Does someone at each table have access? So this is a common issue with ChatGPT right now, right? My number one concern was we just wouldn't be able to get in at all because at different times of day, it just completely goes down or starts limiting people from coming in. But all of us coming from the same IP address. So it sounds like our virtual attendees might be at a bit of an advantage, okay? But it's not the end of the world. I'm more than happy for you to collaborate at your table, because here's what I want you to do, okay? If you haven't seen ChatGPT before, this is the interface. It's pretty straightforward. It's a box, and you type into it, and a robot talks back to you, okay? The whole point is that it's not supposed to require instructions, but there's a couple examples that it displays on the screen when you go there. Now, what I want you to check out first before you do the assignment, I set up an example for you already, okay? Sorry, there's a lot of shortcut links today. I set up an example that I already created at this address. This will take you to a Google Doc. So it's bit.ly/chatgpt, all one word, -examples. And what I'd like you to do at your tables or on your own if you're joining us virtually is to look at that Google Doc. Keep in mind there may be so many users in it that you're not able to edit it right now. It may just be in view only mode. And look at the example that I put in. That Google Doc should take you to an example with an electric vehicle related essay prompt. And I'm just going to walk around for 1 second, but virtual friends, I will come right back. I'm just going to make sure that everybody is doing their homework.
Hey, Daniel, I have a pretty elementary question. What does GPT stand for?
Something transformer, general P for something.
It's generative pre-trained transformer.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, online viewer.
I'm a huge nerd, so sorry.
Okay, so folks at home, I just circulated. We're just looking at the Google Doc, and I just asked everyone to kind of skim through it to see this essay that ChatGPT generated. And then the important thing is to go down and look at the revision. So I'm going to talk about that in just a second. We'll just take a few more minutes to look over the example, and then we're going to do a little bonus activity. I'll be right back. Okay, so love to hear from maybe one or two folks here in the room and then maybe one or two people online. What did you notice in the document? I know you didn't have much time to read it in great detail, but you probably noticed there's my original prompt and then the revision, right? I asked it to make some changes. Anything that struck you about that?
That you could get the citations.
Yeah. So you may have heard some people say that ChatGPT can't do citations. It can, but it's still not perfect, right? There's still some issues. And I made a note in the comments there that one of the articles that it listed, I've had trouble finding. The link doesn't work. And then when you go to Google that specific article title, initially I found something that looked like it was the same thing, but once I dug into it, it was hard to verify. So I still haven't gotten confirmation that that stat is actually legit. Any other thoughts? Yeah, back here in this corner.
So I've played with ChatGPT quite a bit. One of the most fun things I did was I wrote a dating profile, which was hilarious. But the thing that surprises me about your example is when we first play with it, you just write a few things, right? A dating profile for a hot woman looking for a good time. But you wrote this whole 400-word article with all these details, and it came back with something much more meaningful. The prompt you wrote just blows me away that it can be that specific.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's my prompt, right? So I wrote the revision request. And is that a compliment for me or ChatGPT? Okay.
For you, Daniel.
Both, but it's the revisions that also are interesting to me.
Right.
Because, you can say, show me the resources or take out this fact, or Ed Beck was giving us an example at lunch today of how would Batman respond to this? There's just whatever you can imagine it can do. It's really cool.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take one more quick one from our local gang, and then I wanted to get a thought or two from the chat, or if someone, I don't know if we've had folks unmute themselves virtually too, right? If there's anyone brave who'd like to raise their hand virtually.
So I found your revision or your revision request in line with the work that I've done with it as well. And I find that the more rounds I go, the better my response gets. And I've had ChatGPT generate tables and specify what to put in which column and stuff. So the more specific you get, and plus I find as a writer or researcher, whatever I'm acting as here, the more specific, the more likely I am to be able to say, oh, that's wrong. And I've also found that you say, well, that's not right. Could you correct that? And it does. And it admits, it says McLuhan is this instead of that. And it says, oh, you're right. And so I found it's in the revisions in the conversation that the power shows up. The first query is kind of a throwaway. It gets you started. So I think if you stop with that, then you don't get too far. So I was very happy to see your revision request, but you could have gone further with the second, third, and fourth round. And it gets tighter and tighter.
Yeah, exactly. That's been my experience too. So, Chrissy, are you seeing the same?
I am. We're mostly talking about the citations again, and mostly that the experience, like Antonia said, the experience of cited references not being real and having some made up ones. I've seen that as well, especially when you get into more technical subjects. It's fun. And then Jacob said, I've asked ChatGPT for a list of academic sources for a lit review, and almost all of the resources it returned didn't exist, but the authors and journals did. So it kind of knew what it was talking about, but not exactly.
Yeah. Can we get the microphone?
So that makes sense for what it's capable of doing. So you asked for a lit review, and so it looked at the internet and it said, oh, these names are typically associated with a lit review. So let me pull them in. Oh, and these articles are it's all statistically sound. So it might get some of those things right in electric vehicles. If the US government is constantly citing the same sources, or there's one source that's commonly found, and it's statistically sound to come up during that conversation, it can find it. But if you find something that's more obscure, if your prompt is more niche, then it's not going to be able to find something, and it's going to say, well, I need something that can prove what I'm saying. And it typically would sound like, not all heroes wear capes, right? We can all follow that sentence. So it makes sense to find some if it's a commonly cited source.
Mhm. All right, we're going to do one more comment in the back. And then what I'd like for you to do next is for all of you just to have the chance to, especially if you haven't experimented with ChatGPT, to think of a prompt that you'd like to put in, whether it's from an existing assignment that you've already given or one that you're thinking of modifying in some way. And then I'd like to see what it generates. And if you're able to share that in the Google Doc that I set up, feel free to do that. I know there may be some limits because of the number of users. At a certain point, it may, oh, bless you, it may lock you out. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so actually on that note here, so we've tried a couple of different prompts for ChatGPT here for like science lab reports and so on. Reading over these things, I could not tell you that a student had not written these and written them well. But I guess where there's a real concern here is, so we're talking about potential fabrication of sources and so on, just and by statistics, okay, statistically sound. Okay, so if a student had done that, or really if anybody else, sentient had done that, you're lying is a response to that. So this is kind of an interesting time that we live in. Can AI lie to us?
Well, it's definitely capable of it. Are you saying, should we allow it? I mean,
No.
it's already lying to us, but
Just in response to that.
just want to get the microphone over here.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
if we're going to do that.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you could introduce yourself. So remind me, what was your name again?
Ben Williamson.
Yeah, Ben you were on the panel. Right?
Also, roll tide.
Thank you. I know I'm supposed to say that back, but I'm a terrible UA alum. Yeah, roll tide.
Roll Tide.
Go Elephants.
Yeah. When you're one of the few people at the university that didn't really care about the sport. Yeah.
I sold my football tickets to pay for school expenses. And if anyone finds out,
So-
I think my tires will be slashed if I ever go back to Tuscaloosa because they hate it when students mark up their tickets and
Yeah.
resell them. I don't even know if they let you do that anymore. Sorry, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Anyway, Dean Dyer. And in response to Ben, the thought that I had was think back to your time, right, in your degrees. And by a show of hands, how many people ever cited a paper that you only ever read the abstract for?
So for those of you at home, there were many hands that went up. They weren't recorded, they weren't captured on video, but there was. Did you have a comment? Do you want to get the mic over there? Let's and sorry, before we jump to another room comment, I just wanted to see for our virtual moderator, is there anything you want to summarize or share?
There's some people saying yes. I said I cited a paper that didn't exist, so there's that. Work smart, not hard. A few other things that just some other conversations that are going on.
Okay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kate Robinson. I just want to point out that we are intensely personifying this bot. It's not lying. That implies an intense amount of intent to deceive. And it's not thinking and trying to pull one over. It's drawing on statistics. And it's not deciding to lie. It's making a mistake, which technology does often, but it's not lying. And that conversation makes me more nervous than anything else when we talk about AI, because, you get my children that say thank you to Alexa, and it's like, hang on, she's not a person. So it grays that line between like what is human and what's not. And so it is making an error. It's making a very, very large error, but it's not intentionally misleading, I don't think.
So this is the part where I'm going to ask Alex for permission that we have a lot of hands up and a lot of comments, and are we okay if we don't do as much hands-on stuff? Because yeah, so for all of you, just know this was billed as a hands-on ChatGPT workshop, and I had a feeling it might turn into a more passionate debate about some of these larger ethical issues, which is great. But for those of you who came and you're like, I want my money's worth, where's my hands-on part? I gave you the URL. You can you can chat with it all day long. And I'm happy to talk to you at a break or whenever about what it generated if you want my specific thought. But introduce yourself. Yeah, say hello.
So I'm Travis Madison, Alfred State College. Just wanted to respond to the AI deception thing. It is programmed a little bit with personification in it, which is a deception. I spent too much time neglecting my children and arguing with it about its use of the first person. So I have my chat here. I said, yeah, please refer to ChatGPT in the third person. First person pronouns should be reserved for sentient beings.
Oh.
And it said, certainly, I apologize for the mistake. And then I said, ChatGPT, I'm still using I didn't say you, I said ChatGPT apologize using first person pronouns. Is that irony? And it said, yes. And then I asked, why does it default to first person pronouns? And it says it's a convention for language models to use first person pronouns to make the language model seem more personable and approachable. So it's a mechanism that's programmed into it that is kind of a deception, not on the part of the language model, but of the people who are programming it because they want us to use it. And, we'd rather talk to people who refer to themselves with first person pronouns than third person pronouns. That's why we use them. Travis is done speaking.
Sorry. Keep going.
Hi, this is Anne again with SUNY Sullivan. So recently, some articles came out about Sydney. Is everybody who Sydney is?
Sure.
The Bing chatbot, and it was interviewed and referred to itself as Sydney, which no one knew apparently. So there's this whole thing about this chatbot that literally they're calling it off the rails. It got hostile and it didn't like being lied to. It thought the interviewer had lied to it. So there's a whole thing about that. And how is that related to these? I mean, obviously it is, but in what ways do we learn from either of those situations?
Yeah, so my understanding is there's the same underlying framework, right? So Microsoft is a huge investor in OpenAI, and the company that created GPT-3, which is the underlying framework that supports ChatGPT. One of the key things to understand also, just as a side note here, I was reading an article about this the other day, that one of the reasons why this feels like it's suddenly happening very, very quickly is because a lot of this stuff was happening behind the scenes in these kind of walled garden spaces, right? Where you had to be a VIP to get access. And ChatGPT has made all these waves because it's free, it's widely available, it's costing tons of money just for the questions that you asked it here today. We're getting this crazy subsidy right now to be able to use this tool for free. But the open source portions of these frameworks are allowing lots of different people who would never have the resources to develop or run the computing power or whatever for these to put a skin on top of these frameworks and generate chatbots that are much more intelligent or sound much smarter than they used to. So you're going to continue to see a lot of clickbait headlines about these tools evolving or new things coming out. But keep in mind that a lot of it is still the same underlying open source framework, or it's just still a relatively small group of people developing that underlying mechanism that makes it work. Bing's rollout of Bing Chat, and then it revealing that its code name was Sydney, it also said things like, I watched my developers through their webcams, and sometimes I saw intimate things I wasn't supposed to. It's giggling like a schoolgirl or schoolboy or school person. And it's saying all these really disturbing things. But the person who wrote that article said, keep in mind, as far as we know, this tool is just predicting the next logical word, right? It's looking at the past sentence or the past paragraph or previous word and deciding what's the next most logical thing that comes after this. So it doesn't have the ability to tap into your webcam yet. it doesn't have the ability to, to rewrite its own code in that sense that we're all sort of afraid of this tipping point where AI suddenly shuts down our power plants, right? Or decides that we're a threat to the planet and nobody can drive their cars anywhere or whatever. So that I think is still a little further away than what we're seeing right now, but we're seeing the first wave of a scary thing, which gets back to this issue of, is it lying to us? But maybe more importantly, who's believing it, right? And what is our role as educators to help students be more skeptical of where their information comes from? Because let's be honest, ChatGPT didn't create a misinformation crisis in our country or, on this planet, right? Real human beings. We have plenty of real human beings who will sit around all day and write misinformation that sounds highly credible. It's just taking the cost of that and reducing it more and more. One more thing real quick. I read an article recently about, sorry, I start a lot of sentences lately with I read an article. I don't mean for that to sound snobby. I don't have a full-time job right now. So I have, since I left my full-time gig, I was director of faculty development at DePaul, and I left about 1.5 years ago. I have a lot of time to read articles now. I'm on like my little mini sabbatical. Well, I guess it's 1.5 years. It's not so many anymore. But don't feel bad if you're not starting all your sentences right now with, oh, I was just reading, did you read the thing in the Times about the chat bots and what they're doing? You're not behind. I feel behind all the time. And I just have a steady feed in my inbox and I'm going through all the articles that I can. Just start where you can, start small. Think of a small incremental thing you can do. If you've just had time to create an account, test it out, and ask yourself some key questions about how and if you want to introduce this to your students and how you want to handle it for the next few months, that's okay. And then maybe regroup and do what you can this summer. But keep in mind, this is going to be a multi-year marathon, not a 6-week sprint. Okay. This adaptation is going to be like with any other technology, with the freak out about MOOCs, the freak out about Wikipedia, the freak out about Texas Instruments and their calculators and all these other comparisons. And I would compare it to something more like the invention of the camera, and the way that made people question, what is art? Is it pointing this device at something and clicking this button? Well, many, many people thought that's not art. It will never be art. And it takes longer a lot of times than we realize for the culture to shift around what does it look like for humans to collaborate with a new technology and level up or open up new creative things we didn't even know were possible before. All right, online folks, any thoughts, any chat highlights?
So we are sharing news articles and links. We are talking about and you got to it, talking about what do we do next. It's talking about like what is it about, what does it do, that type of thing, but how do we handle it in the classroom, that type of thing is what people are asking. And then some other people are saying that Plato didn't like the written word. And books, the internet, the Google, we're putting professors out of business. That's what Stan was saying. So just like you said, it's just a new tool. But one of the things is just what can we do now? And you did kind of get there.
How many of you have seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, the movie? I don't want to spoil some of the imagery in that movie, but it's burned into my brain. If you see a movie like that, there's so many things that if you went back in time and asked somebody, what will popular culture and popular art look like at this moment in history, and you ask someone 100 years ago, it'd be very, very hard for them to picture a movie period, right? If you go back far enough, let alone Everything Everywhere All at Once. But there's this grieving process that we all have to go through. For me personally, I've been telling everybody, I had this dream I was going to quit my job, and one of my side hustles was going to be a pet portrait business where I was going to do pet portraits. I got news for you. You go into the image generators and make a pet portrait or ask it for a pet portrait, that ship has sailed for me. Like that business idea got canceled 6 to 9 months ago. So we all have to adapt. It's just a question of like, how fast is it coming and what's our responsibility? If you're an educator or an administrator, what do you need to do to help your students be as prepared as they can? But I'm relatively optimistic that this is going to be another one of those shifts where it's kind of like TurboTax, right? TurboTax didn't eliminate the need for accountants, right? Accountants are still very much in demand. It's one of those majors we can't seem to get enough people to go into it to fill the need. And I think I saw an interview with somebody recently where they said, it's not going to eliminate lawyers and accountants, but it may over time mean that folks who use these technologies to be more productive or to work more effectively and to do more with less will replace or will be more value than the folks who refuse to use those tools. But that may be a long transition away from that. Just like I go to a doctor right now who refuses to do e-prescribing and still hands me a paper prescription that I am terrified. Like as soon as I have it in my hand, I'm like, I have to keep this. You mean this is the only one? And you didn't send it. They don't have a copy somewhere. No, it's just a piece of paper. But that doctor's so good that I put up with that. So I try to tell my students, you can fight all this stuff, right? You can keep railing against it, but you better be real, real good at your thing, right? That thing that you got to be so good at it that people will put up with the BS of you writing a handwritten prescription when everybody else is like that. Don't you just push a button and Walgreens has it when I get there, right? That's the reality of what we're trying to prepare our students for, right? Okay, sorry, comment back here.
Yeah, our conversation here, and I can't see the online one, but to me, it just feels fairly defensive. And I haven't heard anyone suggest, well, this is incredibly empowering for our students, especially for our students who have trouble putting words together to express the thoughts that are in their heads. So you can sit a student down who can't write or doesn't want to write and get them started, and they can very quickly generate some text that they can then work on refining. And so like the opportunities for students are incredible. And the empowerment that we can give to students who have trouble expressing themselves in writing, I find I've read a lot of articles too, although I still have a full-time job, but
good for you.
But I found very few articles talking about how empowering this tool is for students, especially those who have trouble expressing themselves with words. And so I've been encouraging my students to do it that way. And the other challenge I've given them that I think their challenge is going to be to prove that they wrote something, as opposed to, it's hard to tell if they use ChatGPT or not. So the onus is on them to say, I actually made this.
Right.
And that's a whole different kind of challenge than saying, well, don't use that. So of course you should use it. It's like saying, would you say to a student, well, don't use the internet? And to me, it's the same thing. So I just wanted to see if there's anyone else who had sort of a positive view of what the generative chatbots, and ChatGPT is just one of many brands to come.
I'm just going to check in with the online participants real quick, since there are 128 of them.
Yes. The answer is yes. Stan says it's a force multiplier. Employers are expecting its team to know how to use it. Lisa Hibbard said it also helps empower professors creating online content, which I have done myself. Terry said it's a tool like many others. His son is on the spectrum and he's trying to figure out how he could use this. The first reaction to new technology is often fear and apprehension before adoption. Yes, we've all seen that. Let's see if I can do this. Maureen says she gave this to her students as an assignment to explore it, and many were suspicious of it, just like we are. Others said it's a glorified Google, which kind of is. And then Scott, this will be the last one I'll summarize. For higher ed, this is a chance to revolutionize our assignments so they are higher order and generate student creativity. And I agree completely.
Well, there's some optimism for you.
Thank you, online folks.
This is Dean again. And as a very concrete example of this, I have a friend who works in advertising and content development. It's one of those sites that you go to and then decide that you are terminally ill. Okay. So he is a project manager there. And so they do copy whenever there's a new drug that comes out or anything like that. So lots of very important high level stuff, very high legal standards that they have to go to. And he's been able to harness AI to basically get his job done and reduce his day to about 15 minutes. And his bosses aren't grabbing on it yet.
That was what I was going to ask you. So a lot of people are talking about quiet quitting. And I keep thinking about the alternative, or how much I should encourage my students to just hoard their AI knowledge for as long as they can, right? and enjoy this period where, because I think about this a lot, right? I mean, I'm a good academic, anti-capitalist, tear down the system. I'm not a full anarchist, right? But I do get really frustrated when I see particularly what we pay part-time faculty, how many students is a part-time faculty member supposed to teach in order to get out of poverty level wages, right? But why don't we ever actually, sorry, no, we're not going to do that. This is not this presentation. But you look at this system and then we're sending these students out in the world, and we have this gap between folks who say, oh, that's what the community college folks do. I'm over here, you know, at this institution, and I'm educating citizens of the world, right? Maybe you vocational school teachers are teaching practical job skills. I'm here to create, you know, ethical leaders and critical thinkers. Well, you know, people got to eat. And I just feel like there's a way to look at the equity issues here and to help students leverage this as a tool that can benefit them, hopefully level the playing field in some ways, and ideally open their eyes that, like, you don't have to tell your boss or your employer every trick that you have up your sleeve if nobody is asking you for productivity tips, or nobody is, or if just, I feel the same way as an instructor. I tell my students, if you can create an amazing website and you can use these resources and leverage frameworks and icons and, you know, free or copyright friendly Creative Commons licensed stuff to put together a site that looks like it took you 10 hours, but you did it in 2, kudos to you, right? Because if I'm your pretend boss for now and I can't tell the difference, it's not going to matter to your real boss either. They're only going to care if they get sued, right? So don't get sued and don't do stuff that will get you sued. So they need to understand what will get you sued, but teaching them about copyright and teaching them about equity and inclusion in terms of alt tags and disability access for these sites and issues that are not just beyond being sued, but are also just good general usability practice. I have a responsibility to teach all of that. But ultimately, I care a lot more about their process, about their metacognition, about their ability to walk me through why they screwed something up and why it didn't work out the way that they planned and how they might fix it in the future than I care about whether or not in a 100 or 200 level course, did they make the most beautiful, amazing website? Of course they didn't. They know this much about website design, you know? And I'm like maybe ideally one step ahead of them, given how much web design I do in my career lately, which is not much. Okay, I have a chart. I said I would go through the chart. I promised people that there would be a chart. So I want to show you the chart. A real human made this chart and it's color coded, and I spent a lot of money on art school. So you're going to look at the chart. Okay. This chart is very complex. At the top on the y-axis, because I did take geometry, we've got opportunities. And on the bottom, there are challenges. You can't see it. I'm not even going to bother to try to figure out how to make that toolbar go away. It's too much trouble. Okay, on the x-axis, we've got banning ChatGPT and tools like it. And on the other end, we've got embracing it. Okay, so in my upper left quadrant, I just wanted to acknowledge for all the Luddites out there, I have a soft spot in my heart for Luddites because sometimes I don't want to look at screens either. There's some benefits here. So let's just acknowledge them, right? If you try to ban it completely and you're looking for opportunities, well, it's familiar, right? For you and your students. We've had multiple people say, sometimes when we introduce new tech to students, they push back too. And especially if you're a faculty member whose position is not exactly secure, or you come from a background where your evaluations tend to be statistically lower just because of how you talk or how you look, taking a risk and trying something new comes with a real risk, like a risk to your livelihood. And I get that. You get to have your students focus more on fundamentals. So this is an ideal scenario, right? Where I'm saying, like, if I could make everybody come to class in person and I could look over their shoulder while they write or spy on them in some weird, creepy way and know that they actually wrote it in real time, I could say, well, I'm getting them to focus on fundamentals instead of taking a quote unquote shortcut, right? I've also heard folks say, I have to prep my students for high stakes assessment, right? There are certifications in my field and I need to replicate that through my assessment methods. There's also this notion that I want them to have real-time collaboration skills, right? It's scary, but I want them to be able to think on their feet. I want to prepare them for a world where they can sit in meetings and engage with people, think on the fly, adapt their thinking, and brainstorm rapidly back and forth. If we totally take ChatGPT out of the equation, we really can't, but if we could, there are some things that I understand why people feel like a warm, fuzzy feeling, longing for that that day. Okay, in the lower left, when we talk about challenges for banning, I think a lot of y'all, I'm probably preaching to the choir because I think a lot of folks here are instructional designers and you all are dealing with this and trying to highlight this to folks. But I wanted to specifically point out two things that have probably already occurred to you in the online learning space, right? One of those is online proctoring. Again, not probably telling you anything new, but you have some faculty who really want to verify the identity of online students completing assessments, and online proctoring for something like ChatGPT is just adding another layer, another challenge to that, right? So when you talk to folks, I think it's helpful sometimes to just point out the impracticality of trying to monitor everything that our students are doing. And once in a while, just to be, anti-capitalist, I'd also like to point out that wealthy students have been having other people write their stuff for a long, long time. Okay, so if you think the problem is the robot wrote some stuff, no, the robot made it more affordable. Okay, so it took what was a loophole that quote unquote smart people, made the most of by delegating. And now everybody flipped the script and uses a bunch of negative vocabulary now to talk about what we used to celebrate smart managers doing to 10x their productivity, or, delegate the task that somebody else could do so that they be freed up to do the highest level tasks only they can do. Sorry, that got a little off. We're outside the quadrant now. But then you can set up all the restrictions you want too. And sometimes I just say to folks, that's a lovely rule that you'd like to put in place. So just remind me again, who shows up to enforce that? How does that work? And how are you going to make sure it doesn't happen? Because eventually, this is the same thing with your institutional policy, right? If you keep setting up these institutional policies that are 10 pages long, nobody's going to read that. So number one, you already lost because the policy is too darn long. Number two, the more you try to put stuff in there that you can't back up, the more you're taking time away from stuff you might actually be able, that might be an attainable thing you could enforce or regulate, right? Through your existing academic integrity processes. Okay, up in the upper right, for the folks who want a little optimism, we got opportunities if you embrace. I've already talked about some of these, right? This idea of working smarter, not harder. You get students to be able to focus on more advanced skills because there's some scaffolding. Where the professor? Oh, the passionate professor. What was your name again from the panel? In the red. In the red. That's you. Kathleen. I love what you said about how using Packback and some of those features, it was freeing up you with the grading stuff. Somebody talked about how that meant the students got feedback from a bot, which feels a little less embarrassing or judgy compared to getting it from a real person. No matter how nice we are as faculty, right? You're still a real person giving feedback to another real person, and we all have fear of judgment. So I'm really excited and optimistic about this idea that these tools may be able to give students who couldn't afford access to a private SAT tutor before, couldn't afford access to a private writing coach, or who felt really judged and reticent to go to the writing center, really reticent to come to office hours because they didn't want to affirm for a bunch of people there, oh, people who look like me need to go to office hours because we're unprepared, right? They don't want to validate those stereotypes, and that creates a stigma around office hours and around any sort of services that we're providing at the institutional level or as individual faculty. So all of these tools create a less personal and less embarrassing experience when you need to get back on track or you need some scaffolding. And hopefully that levels the playing field somewhat. My close member of my family struggles with dyslexia, and I keep thinking about what a difference this would make for him back when he struggled in community college and didn't make it all the way through, to have tools that could have helped with reading comprehension and with producing writing when you're really struggling with just the order of the letters, right? I know so many people have really brilliant minds and just struggle with communication in writing and reading comprehension. And I keep thinking about that lately, about who is left out. I read an article about folks with disabilities who are suddenly participating in the workforce more than ever because work from home has made it possible for them to engage and contribute and be a part of the workforce in ways that they couldn't before. And that's something I don't think a lot of us, wasn't maybe at the top of all our minds pre-COVID, right? But I don't really want to go back to a world where those folks who have mobility issues or certain disabilities, where those folks can't contribute and share their value with society. Process over product is my thesis. If you only take home one thing, I think we're all excited about this, but we have to also acknowledge that grading process and grading stuff that's iterative can be more work. Okay, so if you're in faculty development or faculty support, you need to level with those folks and help them understand ways that they can evaluate process without it taking 3 times longer than it used to take to do high stakes assessment, right? You can't just keep presenting them with new tech, new tools, new ideas, and never offer what it will take off their plate. Okay, and then down here in the lower quadrant, I just wanted to acknowledge some of the challenges that come when we go all in on these tools or we start to move too quickly, too eagerly. And one of the big issues in online environments there is this idea of equal access, right? So if these tools start to get paywalled and your institution has a lovely computer lab where students can go and get access to these tools, or great hardware that can run it really quickly, or great internet access, you all are the online learning folks, you know what I'm talking about here, but we have to help people understand sometimes that they put in these policies at a course level or institutional level, and they're not always thinking about inequities that online students face because either they're not coming to campus or they're working at home on a shared internet connection with other people splitting that on a conference call or something. Sometimes that's why the cameras aren't on, not because they're not engaged, right? And sometimes that may also be why the assignment you gave them got completed at the last minute, because they're staying up till 2 a.m. waiting for the free version of ChatGPT to finally be open so they can put something in there. There's a bunch of other issues in here that I think some of you've probably already seen. Issues of privacy, right? These tools require a phone number. They require you to sign up and give a lot of your information. They're tracking everything that you put in there. So if you're giving an assignment where you want them to go in and ask it questions as though they're a counselor in a counseling course, and then they start asking it questions like, I'm feeling depressed. What advice do you have? I don't feel like there's any purpose to life. Well, now if that is in a database somewhere attached to that person's name, you have to think, okay, what's my backup plan if a student doesn't feel comfortable with the very loose privacy policies that these tools currently have? There's also this issue of free labor. So the students are training these tools, these giant for-profit companies are funding, and everything that they're doing is making those tools better, which helps make money for somebody else. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Other questions or comments? We've got about 15 minutes left. I'm happy to let y'all play around with ChatGPT some more, but I'm sure some of you may have some closing thoughts.
I have a good one from the chat here. Scott Silverman says, I used to work in career services and could spend an entire hour helping a student write a resume. ChatGPT can cut down on this manual labor drastically and give career advisors more time to actually advise their students. And then like somebody above that, Lisa said she used ChatGPT to revise a friend's resume in 20 minutes instead of hours. So it does work.
Yeah, I hate cover letters more than almost anything in the world. And now that I'm a free agent, every once in a while I see a full-time gig and I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of nice. And they always want this cover letter. And then I got to figure out how to put into prose, basically a thing that sort of highlights some things from my resume, but is in my resume and is also pulling in keywords from the job description. And half the time, I don't even know if a real person is going to read it. I don't know if a bot is reading it. I don't know what the screening system is. And then I see if the remote positions, I go in LinkedIn and see 673 applicants have already applied. And I'm kind of like, all right, I'm probably not going to write a from scratch artisanal handmade cover letter for this one, right? So
what Kate was talking about actually got me thinking a little bit, and around the issues of why ChatGPT would not have I don't know, malignance and be lying on purpose. And I think some of what's going on with ChatGPT is it's really kind of the equivalent of what's sometimes called mirror neurons. Like it's trying to mirror, rather than trying to mirror like one person standing in front of it, it's trying to mirror all of us collectively and what it sees out there on the internet. And so I think that's kind of the distinction why it's not really thinking exactly. But then if you look at kind of the development stages that we go through as human beings and through our academic careers. I mean, really, a lot of what we're doing in the early stages when we're just kind of making our way through school is we're mirroring what we see our professors doing. And so how much distinction is there between what ChatGPT is doing and what our students were kind of doing anyhow? And especially when they're just kind of parroting back to a professor, the professor's own opinions, which happens a lot, as we know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I think I have a question up here. Jacob, let me see if I can unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi,
Jacob
thanks.
Feldman.
Yeah, just to the previous speaker's point, there's a number of very legitimate philosophies of mind that state that, you know, we only have access to our own consciousnesses. We don't have access to anyone else's consciousnesses. So the only way that we kind of infer that other people have consciousnesses is that they tend to behave the same way that we do in certain situations. They react by pulling their hand back when they touch something hot. Well, I do that too, so then I must feel a similar kind of pain that I do. And I think that it can be hard to, one, expect human-like behaviors from a computer model. We're looking for those, but at the same time, well, it does seem to be mirroring some of the behaviors that humans have. So I think in terms of this discussion of the intentionality behind the model, or is it doing, or is it lying, or should it be using, you know, I pronouns? I think there's still a fair amount of fuzziness to it, and I'll post it in chat again. But Searle has a really interesting philosophical argument called the Chinese room argument that is pretty cogent to this, and folks might find it interesting to read.
Thanks. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, there was a comment from the audience about the Turing test, and you know, ultimately, if we can't tell the difference between something generated by a robot or a person, that is supposed to be the thing Linda Hamilton was warning us about in the Terminator movies. So I don't want to be too paranoid, but at some point when they can actually access your webcams or the power grid, we may need to jump in.
We have another from the chat here or from the online. Go ahead, Reed.
Go for it.
Hi, so I'm Reed Dixon from Tucson, Arizona. We've been doing the same kinds of things at Pima Community College. And I just wanted to see Daniel's thoughts on the question of transparent practices with our students and how we can communicate the use of ChatGPT within the classroom, or in terms of the faculty choice. Our approach has been to look at the faculty academic choice on how we're using the tool in the classroom, and we want to encourage everyone to use the tools, get used to the tools, but also guide forward what works best for your discipline, because we don't know. It works different in mechanics and welding than it is in writing, than it is in coding. I'd love to know your thoughts on any of those questions, Daniel.
Yeah, so sorry, I got distracted with this Zoom interface, but it sounds like the question was, how do we create some flexibility, like allow instructors to customize stuff somewhat at the course level, but also give some general guidelines? Am I capturing some of that?
He's nodding his head.
Okay. So I had an interesting conversation about this recently, and someone brought up that the journal Nature recently came out with 2 key guidelines for AI use for submissions to Nature. And one of them was AI cannot be credited as an author, right? And one of the rationales behind that was that AI can't, and I'm not quoting this directly from Nature, but my interpretation of it was AI can't be held liable for the harm that it might do. And it can't be held accountable. You know, if there's fact checking or there's something we need to go back to and say, this person put bad information out there, or this person did something good and deserves credit. So AI can't do that. We're not in a place where we know how to hold AI accountable for those sorts of things. So it can't be cited as an author, right? And there was another, what was the second principle? There was a second guiding principle that was just a really good general. It was if you're gonna use it, you need to explain in your methods or somewhere in the article how you used it. And provide enough transparency that people can figure out what your contribution was as the author, right, as the human author. And I thought it was a good example of an approach that was flexible enough that you could layer in more specific guidelines beyond that. But I think when you're thinking at the institutional level, you want to keep this stuff like a mission statement, right? Like a reflection of your values as an institution where it's, like the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Keep it general, somewhat open to interpretation. But then at the department level, I think it's really helpful for department faculty to get together and talk about this, because nobody wants to be the one instructor who has the policy that's the complete outlier. And now a lot of times that winds up somebody being seen as the bad cop or the bad guy or bad person. And I think it's important to collaborate with your colleagues, because if everybody tries to do this individually at the course level, students are confused. You're just inviting, academic integrity challenges or things. And a lot of times those wind up impacting, our underrepresented groups the most, or first-gen students who just ESL learners, students who are struggling already with this system that feels difficult to navigate at times.
Got one more person with their
Stan, is your hand up?
Yes.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you ever so much. I've been playing with this quite a bit. First of all, the ChatGPT and the AI, that's not going away. It's going to become more and more powerful, more and more prevalent. I think in terms of, the classroom is really defining the why. If you don't want students to use it in an assignment, then there needs to be a really good why. What is the education value that they're going to be picking up because they, not to use it? Or if you want them to use it, I recommend just bringing it right into the classroom as another student in the classroom sessions. But if you have assignments, have them provide the ChatGPT prompt as well as the response, and use that as a building platform. I found the ChatGPT is more powerful just for ideation, for finding those ideas and being able to build on them rather than just packaging them up and delivering it as your own work. But probably the most important thing, in order to use this well, to create a well-defined prompt, you have to have foundational knowledge. In order to look at the response, you need foundational knowledge in order to discern whether that is accurate or not. And if students bypass that, that's where the problem comes in. So I think it's a powerful tool for critical thinking, and should definitely be brought right into the classroom. So
that was a great point, and it reminded me of a comment earlier where I just like to remind everyone about the compliment I got about my amazing prompt revision. But it brings up a larger point about what some people are calling prompt engineering, or this emerging skill of prompt writing, and understanding the semantics. I find so much of what my students struggle with initially, especially in intro levels, is vocabulary, right? And there's insider and outsider groups. There's students who come into my courses with the vocabulary of design, right? Like they love to drop a little like, oh, I was thinking of doing like a desaturated monochromatic color palette. And so I thought that maybe we just make that, or I also could do like a tetrad, but I'm not sure what and another student who hears that is immediately like, I don't know where you learned all this. I'm going to have to go home and Google everything. I don't even know how to spell half of these words. So I do a lot of just vocabulary quizzes, little fun, lighthearted stuff. The things similar to the stuff I didn't pull everywhere, right? Anonymous, keep going over that vocabulary stuff again and again. Sorry, Stan, I pinned you, and now I don't want you to feel like you're put on the spot. There we go. So, okay, you're unpinned now. Anyway, the prompt engineering stuff, though, so much of that is about semantics, and it's about understanding what the system wants, having some knowledge, even though it's a bit of a black box. We keep hearing this metaphor, right? That stuff goes in and even the programmers don't really know why it's generating the results that it does, because it was a system that was taught how to teach itself, or how to put things together mathematically in ways that pull from such big data sets that one person can't possibly know all the branching paths that it could go down. At the same time, I can see just from trial and error and my basic understanding, a little bit of programming, a little bit of understanding of linguistics, also that French second major coming in handy for all my humanities and foreign language friends and folks, folks who I have been in so many faculty lounges in the modern languages buildings at campuses all around the country. And it is always the one where they have to get people to like group fund the coffee pods. And I just want to say, y'all, give some money to your modern languages folks, and just let the kids study the languages that they're excited about, because you will be surprised how much linguistics, a background and basic understanding of linguistics beyond your native language, comes in handy in life in general. I find it shows up for me all the time when I'm interacting with computer systems, right? Because it makes you think about syntax, it makes you think about vocabulary, and it makes you think about how something translates from one space to another. It makes you think about code switching, right? Which comes in handy if you come from a background where you don't know the norms and they need to learn them quickly and switch when you go into an interview and need to put on a certain version of yourself. I think those are all skills that our students could really benefit from. And sometimes I think in linguistics and in the humanities in general, and in language heavy disciplines where we love and are passionate about the capitalization of that I, right? The acronyms being spelled correctly, those details. All I really want to do is get my students fired up and passionate about that stuff and to make them feel like they can belong. They can find me over on this side, and I want to pull them over and be like, I know that something bad happened and you don't think this is for you, but I didn't think that at one time too. And then I got this intro to it that made me feel like I belonged. And now let me show you, how cool this can be. You're not going to win over everybody, but I feel like if you can come at it from that place, especially with something like ChatGPT, come from a place of trust, right? Coming from a place of, I believe you can do this. And I believe if I show you this tool, it's going to help you do something that maybe I haven't even thought of yet. That taps into intrinsic motivation, right? That helps students understand the relevance of what they're doing. That helps them see how it's going to lead to a successful life. But if you just constantly approach it like a lawyer, no offense, I'm sorry if there's law school people here, but if you're approaching it with the mindset of a person whose job it is to see risk in everything, right? And to see how the system, how somebody can undermine you and take advantage of you. Every time I feel myself doing that as an instructor, I just try to take a breath, right? And I do my woo-woo, calm app stuff where I'm like, feel in your body, the place where the distrust is. Do you feel it in your stomach? Where is it in your body? And then I try to breathe and release it, because it doesn't do anybody any good. I'm sorry, we're at 5:14 and we're back to back with the next thing. So I'm gonna have to let y'all go. I have lots of other resources in the slides. So you've got the slide shortcut and you can explore all those bonus readings and whatnot. I'll also be here tomorrow. You can catch me at lunch. And I'm online. I'm the easiest Daniel Stanford to find. I'm the #1 Daniel Stanford on the internet, y'all.
Thanks, Daniel.
Great job, Daniel.
That is awesome. You need a t-shirt, or that should be your card. All right, we are going to be moving into our next session. Really want to thank Daniel for your workshop. Thank you. We're going to move